The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across the ballroom floor as Victoria Sterling adjusted the diamond bracelet on her wrist. To the glittering crowd at the Children's Hope Charity Gala, she was simply Marcus Sterling's elegant wife, poised and perfectly decorative. They had no idea that the woman in the midnight blue Valentino gown controlled a business empire worth $12 billion. Victoria sipped her champagne and watched her husband work the room with practiced charm. At 48, Marcus Sterling possessed the kind of confidence that came from believing his own press. His silver-touched temples and expensive smile had graced magazine covers as New York's most influential CEO. The irony wasn't lost on Victoria that those magazines belonged to her media portfolio and other secrets she kept buried beneath layers of shell companies and discreet holdings. Mrs. Sterling, a voice interrupted her thoughts. Oliver Chan approached with his characteristic quiet grace, carrying 2 glasses of vintage Dom Perignon. At 50, her lawyer and closest confidant moved through these social gatherings like a shadow, noticed by few but seeing everything. Oliver, she smiled warmly, accepting the champagne. How did the Yamamoto acquisition close? Seamlessly. The board never suspected Sterling Enterprises was actually acquiring them through Victoria Holdings. His voice was barely above a whisper. Your husband still believes he's negotiating with a Japanese conglomerate. Victoria's lips curved in a private smile. Let him enjoy his illusions a little longer. Across the ballroom, Marcus's booming laughter drew her attention. He stood near the auction display, his hand resting possessively on the lower back of a young woman Victoria recognized from Sterling Enterprises' marketing department. Jasmine Cruz was everything Victoria had been 20 years ago: ambitious, beautiful, and hungry for power. The key difference was that Victoria had actually seized it. Jasmine's scarlet dress clung to her curves like liquid fire, and her laugh rang out above the orchestra's gentle melody. She gazed up at Marcus with practiced adoration, her fingers trailing along his lapel in a gesture that was intimate enough to be noticed, but subtle enough to maintain plausible deniability. She's gotten bold, Oliver observed, following Victoria's gaze. Young women often mistake proximity to power for power itself, Victoria replied, watching as Jasmine leaned into Marcus's whispered comment. It's a common miscalculation. The couple moved toward the dance floor, Marcus's hand never leaving Jasmine's waist. Victoria noted how her husband's eyes sparkled with the thrill of conquest, the same look he'd worn when courting her decades ago. Back then, she'd been charmed by his ambition and drive. She'd supported his dreams, used her inherited trust fund to help him start Sterling Enterprises, and gradually, invisibly, become the financial backbone of everything he'd built. The music swelled as couples swayed across the polished marble floor. Victoria remembered their early years when Marcus would pull her close during moments like this, whispering about their future empire. She'd never imagined that empire would become her solitary creation while he played the role of figurehead. The Donovan merger documents need your signature, Oliver said softly. Once that's complete, you'll own the largest hotel chain on the East Coast. Victoria's eyes remained fixed on her husband and his young companion, including this one, especially this one. The Grand Metropolitan has been the crown jewel they've been trying to sell for months. A server passed with a tray of hors d'oeuvres and Victoria selected a small canapé, her movements automatic and graceful. Around her, the charity gala continued its well-rehearsed performance of benevolence and networking. These people saw what they expected to see: a beautiful wife supporting her powerful husband's philanthropic efforts. None of them suspected that Victoria Sterling had quietly revolutionized 3 industries, created thousands of jobs, and donated more to actual charitable causes than half the room combined. Her foundations operated under different names. Her innovations were credited to teams rather than individuals, and her influence flowed through channels so discreet that even Marcus remained unaware of her true reach. Mrs. Sterling, a photographer, approached with professional courtesy. Could we get a shot of you and Mr. Sterling for the society pages? Victoria glanced toward the dance floor where Marcus was now spinning Jasmine in a slow, intimate circle. I'm afraid my husband is quite occupied at the moment. The photographer followed her gaze and had the grace to look embarrassed. Perhaps later in the evening, perhaps, Victoria agreed, knowing there would be no later. After tonight, many things were going to change. As the evening progressed, Victoria moved through the crowd with practiced ease, accepting compliments on her dress, discussing the charity's mission, and playing her role perfectly. But her mind was calculating, planning, preparing for the conversation she would have with Oliver once they left this glittering facade behind. Marcus and Jasmine had disappeared onto the terrace. and Victoria could see them through the floor-to-ceiling windows silhouetted against the city lights. They stood close together, her hand on his chest, his arms encircling her waist. The intimacy was unmistakable, and Victoria felt the last threads of whatever sentiment she'd held for her. Marriage finally snapped. She finished her champagne and set the glass on a passing tray. The time for maintaining illusions was ending. Tomorrow, she would begin dismantling the life Marcus thought he owned, piece by carefully orchestrated piece. After all, it was much easier to destroy something when you held all the keys, especially when no one realized. You'd been the architect all along. The chandelier's light caught her diamond bracelet one final time as she moved toward the exit, leaving behind the golden cage she'd inhabited for far too long.
The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Victoria's secret penthouse office, 30 floors above the Sterling Enterprises building that bore her husband's name. Oliver Chen sat across from her mahogany desk, reviewing documents while she stood silhouetted against the Manhattan skyline. "The Donovan Hotel acquisition is complete," Oliver said, sliding the final contracts toward her. "As of 9 a.m. this morning, Victoria Holdings officially owns the Grand Metropolitan and 43 other luxury properties across North America." Victoria's reflection smiled in the window. "Marcus has no idea his little romantic dinner last night was funded by my money in my hotel while eating food prepared by my staff." Speaking of romantic dinners, Oliver's voice carried a hint of concern. "The hotel manager reported that your husband charged a $20,000 suite to the Sterling corporate account for the entire weekend." Victoria turned from the window, her expression unreadable. She wore a simple but elegant cream silk blouse and tailored black pants, stark contrast to the elaborate gowns she donned for Marcus's public appearances. Here, in her private sanctuary, she was herself, sharp, focused, and utterly in control. "Show me the surveillance footage from the hotel," she said calmly. Oliver hesitated. "Victoria, are you sure you want to show me?" The wall-mounted screen flickered to life, displaying crystal-clear footage from the Grand Metropolitan's penthouse suite. Victoria watched as Marcus led Jasmine Cruz through the opulent rooms, his hands roaming freely as she pressed against him with desperate hunger. Their bodies moved together with the urgency of new lovers, her crimson dress falling to the marble floor as he lifted her. Onto the Italian leather sofa, Victoria observed the intimate scene with clinical detachment, noting how Jasmine's fingers traced the expensive fabric of Marcus's shirt, how she whispered what were undoubtedly sweet promises in his ear. The younger woman's passion seemed genuine enough, but Victoria's trained eye caught the calculating gleam when Jasmine's gaze fell on the suite's luxury amenities, the champagne, the jewelry box Marcus had brought, the promise of a lifestyle she'd never afford on her marketing salary. "She loves what he represents," Victoria murmured, "not who he is." Oliver muted the feed and moved to stand beside her. "The same way he loved what you represented 20 years ago." Victoria considered this, remembering her younger self an heiress with a trust fund and dreams of changing the world. Marcus had been charming, ambitious, and so confident in his vision for their future together. She'd been swept away by his passion, his plans, his absolute certainty that they were destined for greatness. "The difference," she said slowly, "is that I actually delivered on the promise." Her fingers traced the edge of her desk, where a hidden drawer contained documents that would shatter Marcus's world. Inside were the real ownership papers for Sterling Enterprises, proof that every major decision, every successful acquisition, every innovative product launch had originated from her private companies. Marcus had been the face, the voice, the public presence, but Victoria had been the mind and the money behind it all. When did you realize he would never see you as an equal partner? Oliver asked gently. Victoria's smile held no warmth. 3 years ago, I presented him with a revolutionary AI algorithm my tech division had developed. He dismissed it as too complicated for practical application. 6 months later, he tried to sell a watered-down version as his own innovation to Microsoft. The deal fell through because he couldn't answer their technical questions. She opened the hidden drawer and withdrew a thick folder. That's when I started documenting everything. Every patent filed under Sterling Enterprises actually originated from my research teams. Every major client relationship came through my networking. Every financial miracle he claimed credit for was funded by my investment strategies. Oliver studied the papers she spread across the desk. This is enough to destroy him completely. Destroy. Victoria's laugh was soft but dangerous. Oliver, I'm not interested in destruction. I'm interested in revelation. I want the world to see what I've built, and I want Marcus to finally understand who he married. As if summoned by their conversation, Victoria's private phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at the screen, and her eyebrows rose slightly. It's from Jasmine, she said, showing Oliver the message. She wants to meet me for lunch at Azure Restaurant today. Oliver frowned. That's rather bold. What do you think she wants? To establish dominance, Victoria replied, already reaching for her jacket. She thinks she's won Marcus, and now she wants to put the discarded wife in her place. It's a trap. Of course it is. Victoria's smile was predatory. The question is, who's trapping whom? An hour later, Victoria sat in Azure Restaurant's most exclusive private dining room, watching Jasmine Cruz make her entrance. The younger woman had clearly dressed to intimidate a white Hermes suit that probably cost more than her annual salary, stiletto heels that added 4 inches to her height, and enough confidence to fill the elegant space. Jasmine slid into the opposite chair with fluid grace, her dark eyes assessing Victoria with barely concealed contempt. Thank you for meeting me, Mrs. Sterling. I thought it was time we had an honest conversation. Honesty, Victoria repeated, sipping her sparkling water. How refreshing. Please, speak freely. I think we both know why I asked you here, Jasmine began, her voice steady but sharp. Marcus and I are in love. Real love, not the business arrangement you two have maintained for the past decade. Victoria set down her glass with deliberate precision. I see, and you felt compelled to share this revelation because I want you to make this easy for everyone involved. Jasmine leaned forward, her expression earnest but calculating. Marcus deserves to be with someone who appreciates his vision, his drive, his potential. Someone who can match his energy and ambition. Unlike his current wife, who presumably cannot. Jasmine's mask slipped slightly, revealing the hunger beneath her polished exterior. Let's be honest, Victoria, you're beautiful, you're elegant, but you're also ... settled, comfortable. Marcus needs someone who challenges him, who pushes him to be greater. Victoria nodded thoughtfully. Someone younger. Someone more dynamic, Jasmine corrected, though her satisfied smile suggested Victoria had hit the mark perfectly. I see. Victoria paused as the server approached to take their order. I'll have the seared salmon. And you, Miss Cruz, the same. Jasmine waited until they were alone again before continuing. I know this must be difficult to hear, but Marcus has been unhappy for years. He's told me everything. How you've grown apart. How you don't understand his business anymore. How you've become more interested in charity galas than real achievement. Victoria's expression remained serene, but Oliver, watching from a discreet table across the restaurant, caught the slight tension in her shoulders. He knew that look. Victoria was calculating, measuring, preparing for something that would leave. Her opponent utterly demolished. "Marcus discussed our private life with you," Victoria said. "It wasn't a question. He needed someone to talk to. Someone who understands what it's like to build something from nothing." Jasmine's voice carried a note of triumph. "He's created an empire, Victoria. Sterling Enterprises is his legacy, his masterpiece. He deserves a partner who can appreciate that kind of genius." "His genius," Victoria repeated softly. "Exactly." Jasmine leaned back, clearly believing she'd made her point. "I'm not asking you to disappear, of course. I'm sure Marcus will be generous in the divorce settlement. But I think we both know this. Marriage has run its course." Victoria was quiet for a long moment, her fingers drumming silently on the white tablecloth. When she finally spoke, her voice was gentle, almost motherly. "Miss Cruz, may I ask what you believe you know about Sterling Enterprises' actual financial structure?" Jasmine blinked, clearly not expecting the question. "I know Marcus built it. From the ground up, I know he's worth billions. I know he's one of the most successful entrepreneurs of his generation. And you know this because I work there. Because I've seen the quarterly reports, the profit margins, the growth, trajectory. Because Marcus has explained how he revolutionized 3 industries through pure innovation and determination." Victoria nodded slowly. "I see. And in all these conversations about his empire, his genius, his revolutionary innovations, did Marcus ever mention where the initial funding came from? The seed money that allowed him to start Sterling Enterprises?" For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Jasmine's features. His business acumen attracted investors, early believers in his vision. "Investors," Victoria repeated. How wonderfully vague. Their salmon arrived, perfectly prepared and artfully plated. Victoria took a small bite, savoring both the food and the moment. Across the table, Jasmine's confidence was beginning to crack around the edges. "Miss Cruz," Victoria said finally, "I'm curious. In your research into the man you love so desperately, did you ever wonder why Sterling Enterprises has never gone public? Why, for a company worth billions, there are no publicly traded shares? Marcus values privacy. He doesn't want to answer to shareholders. Or perhaps," Victoria suggested, her voice still gentle, "he can't go public because he doesn't actually own the company he claims to have built." The color drained from Jasmine's face. "What AR?" The tension in the Sterling penthouse that evening was thick enough to cut. Marcus paced the marble floor of their living room like a caged predator, his usually perfect hair disheveled from running his hands through it. Jasmine sat curled on the white leather sofa, her earlier confidence replaced by shell-shocked confusion. "You're telling me she claims to own Sterling Enterprises?" Marcus's voice carried a forced laugh that fooled no one. "That's absolutely ridiculous, Jasmine. Victoria inherited some money. Yes, but the company is mine. I built it. I grew it. She showed me documents. Marcus," Jasmine's voice was barely above a whisper. "Stock certificates, bank accounts. She owns the hotel where we... Double quotes, she trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Marcus stopped pacing and knelt beside the sofa, taking Jasmine's hands in his. His touch was gentle, desperate, the caress of a man watching his world crumble. "Baby, listen to me. Victoria is a bitter woman who's trying to manipulate you, to drive us apart. She knows she's losing me, and she's lashing out. His thumb traced circles on her palm, the intimate gesture a stark contrast to the panic in his eyes. Everything I've told you is true. Everything we've planned together is real. Jasmine wanted to believe him. The way he looked at her, the way his voice broke with emotion, the way his hands trembled slightly as they held hers, it all felt genuine. But Victoria's calm certainty haunted her thoughts. Then prove it, she whispered. Show me the corporate documents, the ownership papers. Show me something that contradicts what she said. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his eyes searching her face. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a vulnerability she'd never heard before. It's complicated. Jasmine, the business structure, the legal arrangements. Victoria handles a lot of the financial details because she has a background in that area. But the vision, the innovation, the leadership, that's all mine. Financial details, like who actually owns the company. She's a minority partner, an investor, but Sterling Enterprises is my creation, my legacy. His voice grew stronger, more confident. Don't let her poison what we have with her jealousy and lies. Jasmine studied his face, noting the familiar confidence returning to his expression. This was the Marcus who had swept her off her feet, the powerful CEO who commanded boardrooms and built empires. Surely Victoria was just a scorned wife playing games. You're right, she said finally, allowing him to pull her close. She's just trying to scare me away. But even as Marcus's arms encircled her, even as he pressed soft kisses to her forehead and whispered reassurances, doubt gnawed at her thoughts. Victoria hadn't seemed like a woman playing games. She'd seemed like a woman stating facts. Meanwhile, Victoria stood in her hidden office, studying the city lights through the floor-toozling windows. Oliver approached with 2 glasses of aged Scotch, setting one on her desk. How do you think she'll handle it? He asked, settling into the chair across from her. Jasmine. She convinced herself I was lying, at least temporarily. She has too much invested in her fantasy to abandon it easily. Victoria lifted her glass, savoring the smooth burn of the whiskey. But the seed of doubt is planted. It will grow. And Marcus, Victoria's smile was enigmatic. Marcus will do exactly what he's always done when faced with a problem he can't charm or buy his way out of. He'll double down on his performance. As if to prove her point, her phone buzzed with a text. Message from her husband. We need to talk, now. Victoria showed the message to Oliver, who raised an eyebrow. That was fast. Fear makes people impatient. She finished her scotch and reached for her coat. Time for the main event. Victoria found Marcus waiting in the lobby of Sterling Enterprises, his expensive suit rumpled and his usual composure cracked around the edges. The security guard nodded respectfully as she approached, another small reminder that even the building's staff knew who really held power here. We need to discuss what happened today, Marcus said without preamble, guiding her toward the private elevator that led to his executive suite. Of course, Victoria replied calmly, though I should mention that Jasmine seems like a lovely young woman, very ... ambitious. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he said nothing until they reached his office. The space was a testament to masculine power: dark wood, leather furniture, and walls lined with awards and photographs of Marcus with various world leaders and celebrities. What the decor didn't reveal was that Victoria had selected and paid for every piece. What did you say to her? Marcus demanded the moment the elevator doors closed behind them. I simply introduced myself properly. Victoria settled into the chair across from his desk, with fluid grace. I felt it was important that she understand the full scope of our family's assets. Victoria, whatever game you're playing. Game, her voice carried the slightest edge of steel. Marcus, I'm not playing anything. I'm simply being transparent about the nature of our business relationship. Business relationship. His voice rose slightly. We're married, Victoria. We're partners. Everything I've built for us, for our future. Have you? Victoria's question hung in the air like a blade. Tell me, Marcus, do you remember where the initial funding for Sterling Enterprises came from? Marcus faltered, his confident expression flickering. Your trust fund provided some early capital, yes, but some early capital, Victoria repeated. $18 million in seed funding, to be precise, plus another $47 million in expansion capital over the first 5 years, plus the connections that secured our first major contracts, plus the investment strategies that generated the cash flow for every major acquisition. She opened her purse and withdrew a tablet, sliding it across his desk. The screen displayed a complex corporate structure chart with Victoria Holdings at the center. This is the actual ownership structure of Sterling Enterprises, she said calmly. As you can see, every subsidiary, every asset, every intellectual property patent is owned by companies that roll up to my private holdings. Marcus stared at the screen, his face pale. You're trying to rewrite history, Victoria. I've been the CEO of this company for 15 years. I've made every major decision, signed every important contract with my authorization, using my resources, backed by my financial guarantees. Victoria's voice remained steady, almost gentle. You've been the face of the company, Marcus, and a very effective one, but you've never been its owner. The silence stretched between them. Marcus slumped in his chair, his hands shaking slightly as he tried to process the documents before him. Why, he whispered finally, why let me believe? Because I loved you, Victoria said simply. Because you were so passionate about your vision, so confident in your abilities, because you made me believe we were building something together. She stood and moved to the window overlooking the city. They had conquered together, or that she had conquered while he took the credit. But love has its limits, Marcus, and those limits are reached when the man I supported, funded, and enabled decides that our marriage is an inconvenience to his affair with a woman who's young enough to be our daughter. Marcus's voice cracked. Victoria, please. Jasmine doesn't mean anything. She's just. I never meant for you to find out. It doesn't have to change anything between us. Victoria turned to face him, her expression unreadable. Change anything. Marcus, you've spent the last year making me feel invisible in my own life. You've dismissed my intelligence, ignored my contributions, and treated me like an accessory to your success story. And now you want to add the role of compliant wife who ignores your infidelities. It was a mistake, a momentary lapse in judgment. I'll end it with Jasmine immediately, will you? Victoria's smile was sad but knowing. And what will you tell her? That the empire she thought she was inheriting doesn't actually belong to you. That the powerful CEO she fell in love with is actually my employee. Marcus's composure, finally, shattered completely. Victoria, please. I know I've made mistakes, but we can work through this. We can rebuild what we had. What we had was built on a lie, Marcus. The lie that we were equals in this marriage, equal partners in this empire. Victoria collected her purse and moved toward the elevator. I'm not interested in rebuilding. I'm interested in finally living in the truth. As the elevator doors began to close, Marcus called out desperately, "What does that mean, Victoria? What are you planning?" Victoria's final words before the doors shut were delivered with quiet finality. "It means tomorrow, the world finds out who really built Sterling Enterprises, and you get to discover what Marcus Sterling is worth without Victoria Sterling's money." The elevator descended smoothly, carrying Victoria away from the performance of her marriage and toward the truth of her power. Above her, Marcus sat alone. In his office, surrounded by the trappings of success that had never truly belonged to him, finally understanding that his golden cage was about to become a prison of his own making. Outside, the city sparkled with possibilities, and Victoria Sterling, the real Victoria Sterling, prepared to step out of the shadows and claim her rightful place in the empire she had always ruled from behind the scenes. Chat controls, sonnet for The morning sun cast long shadows across the Sterling Enterprises boardroom as the executive team filed in for their weekly meeting. Marcus sat at the head of the polished table, his usual confidence replaced by barely concealed anxiety. Dark circles under his eyes betrayed a sleepless night, and his hands trembled slightly as he shuffled through the agenda. "Where's Victoria?" asked Patricia Williams, the company's CFO. "She usually joins us for quarterly reviews." "My wife is indisposed today," Marcus replied stiffly, not meeting anyone's eyes. What he didn't say was that Victoria had spent the night in her secret penthouse office, finalizing documents that would reshape everything these people thought they knew about their company. At that very moment, she was 3 blocks away, preparing for the most important presentation of her life. Jasmine Cruz arrived 5 minutes late, her usual punctuality abandoned in favor of making an entrance. She wore a sharp black Armani suit that she charged to her company credit card, her chin raised defiantly despite the uncertainty that had plagued her since yesterday's lunch with Victoria. "Good morning, everyone," she announced, taking her seat with more authority than her junior position typically warranted. Several executives exchanged glances. Jasmine had been growing increasingly presumptuous over the past few months. "I was saying," Marcus continued, his voice stronger now that his lover had arrived. "The third quarter numbers show continued growth across all divisions. Our innovation pipeline remains robust, and client retention is at an all-time high." Patricia frowned at her tablet. "Actually, Marcus, I've been reviewing the financial structure, and there are some irregularities I need to discuss with you. Privately, the ownership documentation doesn't match what's filed with the state, and there are several shell companies listed as majority shareholders that I can't trace." Marcus's color drained. "Those are legacy structures from our early funding rounds. Nothing to concern yourself with. But as CFO, surely I should understand, Patricia." Marcus's voice carried a warning that made several people shift uncomfortably. "I said, it's not a concern." The tension in the room was palpable when Marcus's assistant knocked on the glass door. She entered with obvious reluctance, carrying an envelope sealed with legal tape. "Mr. Sterling, this just arrived by courier. It's marked urgent and confidential." Marcus's hands shook as he opened the envelope, his eyes scanning the legal document inside. The blood drained from his face as he read, and Jasmine leaned forward with concern. "Marcus, what is it?" He couldn't speak. The document was a formal notice of corporate restructuring, signed by the actual board of directors of Sterling Enterprises, a board he now realized he had never been part of. The letter informed him that effective immediately, All operational decisions would require approval from the company's true owner, Victoria Holdings, LLC. At the bottom of the page, in Victoria's elegant script, was a handwritten note. The performance is over, Marcus. Board meeting at 2 p.m. to discuss your future employment status. V. Marcus. Patricia's voice seemed to come from very far away. You look like you've seen a ghost. Before he could respond, the conference room's large screen flickered to life. Victoria's face appeared, transmitted from her hidden office. She looked radiant, her silver hair swept back in an elegant chignon, wearing a navy blue power suit that commanded instant respect. Good morning, everyone, she said warmly. I apologize for interrupting your meeting, but I have some important announcements to make. The executives stared in shock. Patricia recovered first. Victoria, how are you? Where are you broadcasting? From my office in Victoria Holdings, 30 floors above you. Her smile was gracious but held an edge of steel. I thought it was time you all met your actual employer. Jasmine's voice was barely a whisper. What is she talking about? Victoria's gaze found Jasmine through the camera. I'm talking about the fact that Sterling Enterprises has always been a subsidiary of my private company. Every salary, every benefit, every project budget, all funded through Victoria Holdings. She touched something off screen, and the display split to show corporate documents, financial records, and ownership certificates. As you can see, I hold 97% of Sterling Enterprises through various trusts and holdings. My husband has been serving as CEO at my discretion, but he has never held any actual ownership stake. The silence in the boardroom was deafening. Patricia stared at the financial documents with professional fascination and growing understanding. The irregular ownership structure, she breathed. The shell companies I couldn't trace. They all lead back to you. Precisely. And effective immediately. I'm assuming direct operational control. Victoria's voice was crisp, businesslike. Jasmine, I'm afraid your services will no longer be required. Security will escort you out after this meeting. Jasmine shot to her feet. You can't do this. Marcus, tell her she can't do this. All eyes turned to Marcus, who sat frozen in his chair, still clutching the legal document. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. She can do whatever she wants. It's her company. The admission hung in the air like a death knell. Jasmine stared at him in growing horror. You lied to me, she whispered. Everything you said about your empire, your success, your power, it was all lies. Jasmine, please, you're nothing without her money. The words exploded from her with the force of complete betrayal. You're just a fraud in an expensive suit. Victoria watched the confrontation with calm interest. Miss Cruz, before you leave, I wanted to thank you. Jasmine whirled toward the screen. Thank me for helping me finally see my marriage clearly. Your affair with Marcus showed me how little respect he has for me, for our partnership, for everything I've built. Victoria's smile was genuine. In a way, you've liberated me from a relationship that had become more burden than joy. 2 security guards appeared at the boardroom door. Victoria nodded to them through the camera. Please escort Miss Cruz from the building. Her access cards and company credit cards have been deactivated. As Jasmine was led away, her accusations still echoing in the hallway, Victoria turned her attention back to the remaining executives. Now, for the rest of you, I want to assure you that your positions are secure. You've all done excellent work, and I look forward to working with you more directly. Her expression softened. I know this is a shock, but I hope you'll come to see this transition as an opportunity for greater transparency and more strategic growth. Patricia raised her hand tentatively. Victoria, I have to ask, why this secrecy all these years? Why let Marcus take credit for your achievements? Victoria was quiet for a moment, her gaze distant. Because I believed in the power of partnership. I thought that by supporting Marcus publicly, by letting him be the face of our success, we were building something together. She refocused on the camera. But I've learned that true partnership requires mutual respect and honesty. When those elements are missing, the arrangement becomes exploitation. She stood from her desk, moving to the window behind her. Starting Monday, Sterling Enterprises will undergo a complete rebranding. We'll be operating as Victoria Holdings International, and I'll be taking the CEO position that I should have claimed years ago. Marcus finally found his voice. Victoria, what about me? What about us? Her expression softened with what might have been pity. Marcus, you're welcome to stay on as head of public relations. It's a role you've always excelled at. But the days of pretending you're something you're not are over. She paused, her next words carefully chosen. As for our marriage, I think we both know that ended some time ago. My lawyers will be in touch about the divorce proceedings. You'll be well taken care of, financially, I'm not cruel, but I won't pretend anymore that we're partners when you've made it clear you see me as an asset to be managed rather than a person to be loved. The screen went dark, leaving the boardroom in stunned silence. Marcus sat slumped in his chair, the weight of his deception finally crushing down upon him. Around the table, the executives began to murmur among themselves, processing the revelation that their brilliant, respected CEO had been nothing more than an extremely well-paid actor. 3 floors below, in the lobby of the building that would soon bear her name, Victoria emerged from a private elevator flanked by Oliver and her legal team. Reporters were already gathering outside. Word traveled fast in the Manhattan business community. "Are you ready for this?" Oliver asked, his hand touching her elbow in a gesture that was both protective and intimate. Victoria straightened her shoulders and smiled. "I've been ready for this moment my entire life. I just needed to stop being afraid of claiming what was already mine." As they walked toward the exit, Victoria's phone buzzed with messages from business leaders, journalists, and competitors, all wanting to understand how the quiet wife of Marcus Sterling had been secretly controlling one of the most successful companies in America. She deleted the messages without reading them. There would be time for explanations later. Right now, she had an empire to reclaim and a future to build, this time in her own name. Behind her, Marcus Sterling sat alone in a boardroom that no longer belonged to him, finally understanding that he had never been the king of his castle. He had always been merely a courtier in Victoria's empire, and now the queen was R. The ballroom of the Meridian Hotel, formerly the Grand Metropolitan, sparkled with renewed elegance. Victoria Sterling had transformed the space during her renovation, replacing gaudy gold fixtures with understated platinum accents and adding floor-to-ceiling windows that offered breathtaking views of Central Park. Tonight, the venue hosted the inaugural gala for the Victoria Sterling Foundation, celebrating a year of unprecedented growth and philanthropy. Victoria stood at the center of it all, radiant in a midnight blue gown that seemed to capture starlight. Her silver hair was styled in soft waves, and the sapphire necklace at her throat a gift she'd bought for herself to celebrate her first acquisition caught the light with every movement. She moved through the crowd with natural authority, no longer the silent partner but the undisputed queen of her empire. The foundation has already funded 12 new children's hospitals, she was explaining to a group of potential donors. Our technology initiative has brought high-speed internet to over 300 underserved communities, and our educational programs have provided scholarships to 5,000 students. Patricia Williams, now Victoria's Chief Financial Officer and closest business advisor, approached with a tablet full of real-time donation totals. "We're approaching $8 million in commitments tonight alone," she murmured. The response has been incredible. Victoria smiled, genuinely pleased. When people see authentic leadership and transparent results, they respond accordingly. Across the ballroom, Oliver Chen watched Victoria hold court with a mixture of professional admiration and personal affection that he no longer tried to hide. Over the past year, their relationship had evolved from strictly business to something deeper, more personal. Their partnership in rebuilding the company had revealed a natural chemistry that extended beyond boardroom strategy sessions. "She's magnificent, isn't she?" Patricia commented, following his gaze. "Always has been," Oliver replied quietly. She just finally stopped hiding it. The evening's program began with Victoria taking the stage, her presence commanding instant attention. The audience, a carefully curated mix of business leaders, philanthropists, and media figures, fell silent as she approached the podium. "Good evening," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the sound system. "A year ago, many of you knew me as Marcus Sterling's wife, the woman who stood quietly beside him at events like this. Tonight, you know me as Victoria Sterling, CEO of Victoria Holdings International and founder of the Victoria Sterling Foundation." Gentle applause rippled through the crowd. Victoria waited for it to subside before continuing. "This past year has been a journey of revelation, not just for me, but for everyone who believed that success must be loud to be legitimate. I spent 20 years building an empire in silence, supporting others' ambitions, while sacrificing my own recognition." Her voice carried quiet strength. "Tonight, I want to talk about what happens when we finally stop chat control Sonnet 4.